Welcome to episode 2 of the Garden Blues podcast, and we got a lot to talk about. Artemi Panarin was traded yesterday, mere moments after we finished the conclusion of episode 1, so we got plenty to talk about. We're getting right back at it today here in episode 2, and I figured that we would start, well, first with introducing ourselves. My name is Jake Albee, that's Connell McNeilis, and this is the Garden Blues podcast. So here is Chris Drury's statement regarding the trade of Artemi Panarin. So first, I'd like to start by thanking both Artemi and Carson Soucy for their contributions to the Rangers. We certainly wish them well and all of their families the best moving forward. Artemi's an incredible player, arguably the best free agent signing in the 100-year history of the franchise. He deserves the chance to win, and we wanted to give him that chance as we retool the team. It's never easy to move a player of Artemi's caliber, but it's provided us an opportunity to accumulate valuable assets for the future. As I stated in the letter to our fans, no one is happy with the way we have performed this year. As the president and GM, this is ultimately my responsibility. Coming into this year, we were viewed collectively, internally, and externally as a playoff caliber team, and we have underachieved. I have great faith in Sully. He is one of the premier coaches in this league. It's my job to work with them to fully understand why we have underachieved and how we all improve moving forward. Our fans deserve a Stanley Cup, not a team just hoping to get in as the last wild card. We felt it was best to start this organizational shift sooner rather than later. That will be the guiding principle of every decision we make as an organization. How does this help us return to a Stanley Cup contender? We are going to work tirelessly at this every day to continue to improve and push towards that goal. Woo! Okay, that's a mouthful reading that from Twitter. Thanks to Molly Walker for being there. But Chris Drury, very notably, radio silent most of the time, never really appears on camera in front of the media unless it's the playoffs or once a season. But here he is. He's coming out with his, I don't even know. It's just like a statement to get the ball rolling, I guess. But my biggest problem with this, I think, is the fact that he gets to choose who is reporting this statement. And, it's just state-controlled media. It's all these reporters that he kind of uses to his advantage anyway that are close to the team. And Molly and Vince, they do great work, but they don't always push back in the strongest way. And, maybe it dates back to the previous regime where, of course, the Tom Wilson incident happens. And it sounded like after Dolan made that statement about Tom Wilson, it seemed like JD and Jeff Gorton distanced themselves from that statement. And due to that leak, that was what caused James Dolan to essentially fire them. And then maybe he puts his trust in Chris Drury because maybe Chris Drury promised to him, hey, guess what? None of that is ever going to happen again. Nothing is ever going to leak. And I'm going to be totally silent otherwise. And I'm never going to speak to the media otherwise. But, Coach, I want to get your thoughts kind of on this statement and where we are and how are you feeling about Chris Drury's impact here?
Yeah, I had a few people text me yesterday, and I'll say this first. A bit sad, right? End of an era in any capacity, right? Panarin absolutely was the best free agent signing. We had mentioned this yesterday in the first pod, but one of the best maybe of the salary cap era, and probably the best in the Rangers' history. I mean, that's truly what we're talking about here. So I think you take that in context and all the good that came with that. Obviously, the off-ice stuff as well is not to ignore, and I think that does taint it a little bit, at least for me, and kind of how things ended. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think there's just real concern about what are we doing here? Literally, what are we doing here? There's just seems to be, what is the actual plan? And what I mean by that, one, Rangers already were limited with Panarin's, trade market, with his trade clause and stuff like that, and the trade market like that. And, look, I guess that's kudos to him. It's the reward to him a little bit for being such a good Ranger and one of the all-time great Rangers, frankly. And, okay, that's fine, but obviously that pigeonholes him. And then I think they pigeonholed themselves even more by putting out this statement, which we talked about, which I think at first felt a little numb to it. I was listening to Blue Sea Bog's to podcast today, and Rob Saletti said this. I want to give him credit, but like I think I was the same way. It's like, all right, I've heard this before. Like, okay, I get it. Like, whatever. Didn't take it that serious in the moment, but in hindsight now, I think it put him in a bad spot to not get anything there as far as I'm concerned. Just as far as the leverage goes, and then look, and then you also look into what Panarin signed for, which I missed at first yesterday, and with the cap going up and where things are at, and look, Panarin, it's not like he's going to the Olympics here, so like it's one of those things that like I feel like this felt rushed. I'm not really understand why it got forced so much. I think maybe they could have waited and seen if there's a better market, but at the end of the day, it feels underwhelming. I think we talked yesterday comparing it to Brock Nelson or the Claude Giroux trades or even Marchand, and it wasn't that. So I understand there's the no movement clause stuff comes into it, but honestly, sleeping on it, it's made me a bit frustrated. It's just as far as what the plan is. It's a blanket statement, like you said. It says a whole lot of nothing. If we're being completely honest there, it's a very political statement, just kind of a press release there, kind of a dump, and that's how it feels. So it's an end of an era. It's a bit of sadness and definitely a bit of perplexity here to see kind of what's going to come. I'll say this as a Mets fan. I know a lot of Mets fans maybe felt that way earlier in the offseason, and maybe then some clarity came with it. So maybe more clarity comes out of this. But I really understand why people are frustrated. I understand why people feel like there is no plan, because it doesn't look like much right now. And I feel like it's completely entitled for the entire fan base.
Yeah, and in case you're a more casual fan, and somehow if we are the ones breaking this news, Artemi Panarin signs an extension with the LA Kings at 2 years, $11.5 million, which is the most confusing part of all of this. And
me too.
The narrative that we heard from the beginning of this season was that the Rangers and Artemi's camp, they were not close due to the amount of term and the amount of money that he wanted. And that's all we heard all year long. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he's willing to do this super team-friendly, short-term 2-year deal to the Kings, who are trying to get back to the playoffs. They're like a bubble team. They're probably, maybe they'll get there, but they also haven't won a playoff series since they won the Stanley Cup. Isn't that interesting? That's a weird...
Yeah, I literally did not realize that until I was listening to a bunch of stuff yesterday, like everybody else, and it might have been like Marty Baron or somebody said it, Rupper, somebody, and I was like, wow, I didn't realize that either, actually. So
Star, yeah, and there's also they had that. Was it 4 years in a row? I think they lost to Edmonton. That's that.
Yeah, that's right. Well. Yeah.
Gavrikov was on a couple of those teams, so.
Yeah.
It really is confusing, and you know what? It really gives this strange impression. Like, I get wanting to move on from him, I guess, if you're Drury, right? Like, even he's a point per game player, and you want to change the culture, you want to change the whole vibe of the team. But again, what's bizarre is that the way Panarin has acted throughout this whole process is that it seems like he's genuinely surprised that the team would want to move on. Under no circumstance did it seem like he ever wanted to leave.
No.
And that's kind of the problem with a lot of these guys now, right? It seems like the core of these guys, nobody really wants to go. Even going back to Goudreau, and then Trouba, and then Kreider, and now we're kind of forcing everybody out one by one. And now here we're in this place where he signs a team-friendly deal with the Kings, and we get Liam Greentree back, and a conditional second. It becomes a second if the Kings make the playoffs, if they win a round. But right now it's a conditional third-round pick, and so it's just kind of confusing. I don't want to say it's directionless, but it's like where are we going here? So
it feels that way for sure. Yeah, well, try to find positives here. So again, Liam Greentree being the kind of premise of this trade, and I know the other picks could both bump up. I think 1 round each or something like that, right? If the Kings make a couple runs, but look, Greentree being the focus, I think everybody maybe expected a more NHL ready player in this mix too. I know, like if it was the Kings, like I saw like Laferriere get brought up or somebody like that, or Turcotte, somebody who could bump into the lineup now, I think about when they made those trades back in 2018 and 19 range. Getting a guy back like a Nemestikov or something like that, who's at least a skilled NHL player who could be something else.
Could you imagine we got Vladdy back again?
Dude, I will say, man, I low key, one of my that era, I love Vlad Nemestikov. Just shout out. He's another guy who is just a classic. Oh yeah, we'll trade a forward for Vlad Nemestikov at the trade deadline. But yeah, that would have been hilarious. But someone like that, maybe not quite him. But anyway, Liam Greentree, 26th overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft. So he is now turning 20 years old here. I think he's actually he just did it because he's got a good hockey birthday, January 1st. So big body, 6 foot, 2-3 kind of range right in there, depending on where he's listed. Well north of 200 pounds, and someone who has truly an absolute missile of a shot, a lethal release, soft hands, good IQ. Unfortunately, his biggest hiccup here is his skating. I mean, that's when it kind of feels like that's always seems to be the case here. I will say a lot of reports showing him improving on his skating. He's really kind of pushed it there, but he is a winger here. So seeing the most close comparison, I would say right now for who's out there, I've seen some sort of Jason Robertson kind of comparisons there with a little bit more size and physicality to his game. And also, I've heard some comparisons, at least from a work ethic standpoint, with Mark Stone or somebody like that, somewhere in between, not quite Mark Stone, who's a Selke winner and all that stuff. But, he's definitely seemed to hone that craft a little bit more. Been a captain for several years. He's been a captain, I think, since he was 17 on the Windsor Spitfires there. So he's kind of gone through it. Did have an injury to start this year, so he's actually kind of been a little slower from a point production standpoint this year in that capacity. Look, I'll say this. I think there's certainly an NHL player in there somewhere. Is he an elite prospect? No, probably not. A good prospect, I think, for the Rangers, probably just because of how dry the barrel is right now. Probably is in that top 3 to 5 range for them. I think I'm comfortable saying that, just given his age, because I'm not considering someone, like an Othman at this point, or really a prospect or any of those kind of guys who are older. But skill guy, can certainly make plays with the puck, has an absolute ripper of a shot, can absolutely rip the puck. And his skating certainly has improved, but he's not a blazer by any means. We talked about the Rangers adding speed. I don't think this is the kind of guy to quite get it. But I think the biggest thing is, what you're looking at is, this is still a guy who's probably 2 years away. I mean, he's still playing in junior hockey right now. This is not somebody who's probably going to pop up into the lineup next season. Probably is going to be in Hartford. And look, frankly, that's not the most enticing thing as far as I'm concerned, given our, what we talked about in the first podcast with Hartford's development and how lackluster that has been. So look, an elite puck controller, and as far as using that size and what he could do with the puck, I think he's a very good hockey player. Looks like a very smart hockey player. Can he tie that enough together with the acceleration package to create space and be that playmaker that he is in juniors? I think that would be the next step. But there have been a lot of reports out there, a lot of signs that he has been improving. There was a good, I believe, New York Times piece that I read from last August talking about the productivity and him stepping up, and a lot of scouts feeling higher. Also have a few connections. I texted one who's in the NHL front office somewhere. I'm not going to tell you where, but I asked him what his thoughts are, and his internal analytics said he's not a negative skater. So that's a positive. So I'll take that. He's like, he's not rated as a negative skater. So that's not compared to, for the record, like Othman was rated as a very negative skater, right? So there's your comparison right there. People have heard Othman kind of come out of people's mouth, and I could say confidently, I didn't like Othman from the get-go. I like Liam Greentree a hell of a lot more than I like Brandon Othman. But at the end of the day, this is still a guy who might be 2 or 3 years away from making an NHL impact. Maybe not what you wanted back, and as far as maybe this with an NHL player and a guaranteed first or something, that maybe that would have been what you were expecting. But yeah, that would kind of be where I'd add here. Probably a top 3 or 5 prospect right now for the organization, somewhere in there, which isn't great. So that's not a good thing necessarily.
Yeah, he's definitely a lottery ticket. I mean, he's drafted 26 overall, so that's something. But it really is a lottery ticket. He's 6'2", 207 listed in here. You mentioned Othman, right? And I think we're all rooting for Othman in a way. It'd be a nice story for him to get going and to really find a role on this team. But I think the biggest thing, right, is that he's going to have to develop some other part of his game, and that's something you've heard for the last couple of years, where it's like, well, he's got to he has a little bit of snarl, he has a little bit of toughness, but he's got to incorporate some of that if he's going to find a role either on the third or the fourth line. He's never going to be a top six player probably.
Yeah, no, 100%. And look, I mean, I think Green Street has more offensive upside. I think his game caters more to the NHL. I said he is a better skater, but look, at the end of the day, okay, a middle six winger potentially in the NHL, that's not a bad thing. But for trading Artemi Panarin, I think you probably want more than that, right? I think that's probably how the rest of the process, the fan base feels, especially when you look at what we have in the prospect pool.
Right. And bringing us back to Chris Drury a little bit now, as far as the fan base is concerned, most of the fan base is irate right now. Yeah. As we know, that's all we see. And I think people are really feeling lost as far as a direction on this team. And you mentioned Hartford, and there really is there's just no plan, it feels like. And I'm sure there's got to be some framework of something, but at the same time, this is Chris Drury's first job as not only a president of a hockey team, but he's a general manager of a hockey team. And traditionally, those two things are really hard to do at the same time. I don't know off the top of my head who has successfully done that over the last number of years, but typically you have your general manager, because there's so many parts of being a general manager, and then you have your president of hockey operations. The fact that he's doing both for the first time, maybe we're just witnessing somebody who's potentially not qualified here.
Look, it's absolutely something that has to be brought up at this point. I don't think he hasn't done anything that's proved otherwise, right? I mean, I think okay, some trades, whatever. You think about the Buchnevich trade, which in hindsight, okay, even that I could defend. You were trying to give Kakko and Loff a chance, and look, they didn't pan out. It does happen. Now, that's also another conversation, but no, he hasn't deserved any credit at this point. I mean, after those runs and kind of where they were at going into last season, and just clearly how he handled his business, it didn't work, and he failed in that department. So, right now, I don't think, there's absolute reason for everybody to be questioning that.
Yeah, and you could look at, the playing devil's advocate. I'm not defending him in this, especially right now, but you look at that post-2024 run, and he did what he could do. Most people were saying, okay, what are the biggest problems on this team after this conference final exit, right? Well, it's probably Trouba. He tried to move Trouba. It's probably the Goudreau contract. He got rid of the Goudreau contract, didn't eat any of the salary. But I guess, that's a lesson to be learned if you're the GM. Now, the players, you could argue, most certainly kind of emotionally did not respond in the best way, and they took it out on the ice.
Absolutely.
And whether that's on purpose or it's not, they're both terrible scenarios. But, you got to give him some credit. He did try to get the quote-unquote problems off of this team, but it just dramatically impacted the locker room. And here we are, and we can kind of look at this graph. We can trace it all kind of back to the Barclay Goodrow thing, which is...
Yeah, I know, which is kind of crazy. When you think about it.
Absolutely
when you think
crazy.
about it.
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, look, and that was something I was frustrated with last year. I thought the players responded so poorly, be a pro. And I think there's absolutely two sides to this story. I think Drury could have done a better job. I also think the fact that, guys were that upset about how the business works a little bit, it's kind of the way it goes.
And why sign him? I mean, if you're gonna, sorry to interrupt you, but
I'll go.
If Barclay Goodrow is going to go on a heater, right, and he's going to be maybe your second best player aside from maybe Lafreniere in that series, which is another crazy thing to think about, right? If Barclay Goodrow is going to be your second best player in that series against Florida, and then literally less than 2 weeks later, the fathead that's down on the corner, there's a sports store memorabilia down in the corner, and they had for whatever reason, they had a Barclay Goodrow fathead that was up in the window.
That's hilarious.
And less than 2 weeks later, he's gone. If you're going to be that ruthless, I totally understand it, but then why sign him in the first place?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's trying to get out of a contract. I mean, look, wasn't getting paid millions. And look, at the end of the day, like I think there's maybe a bit of a shock there of, the fact that he really couldn't even trade him off of that. You would have figured there would have been an avenue there. But I think, to me, like, even building off that, like yeah, like if you got to be ruthless, like definitely, yeah, then why sign him? I totally get that. But I also am like, look, it's to me, it's also, look, you could just communicate that a little bit better and just be like, guys, like I do think there's merit to being like, there is a business, like, I understand that Barkley who he is, but by all accounts, I guess that wasn't what was talked about when he did it. But to me, at this point, like, starting with that, obviously, shaking it up, I think we were all like, okay, got out of some bad contracts here. How's he going to respond? And then, look, hands out a couple bizarre ones, right? With on the back end and everything like that with the blue line, and then now is kind of in a spot where he's got this aging team, and now he's got to play more Monopoly to more Tetris, excuse me, to try to get out of this. And it's just a constant maneuvering that I think he's very much created himself, and I think that's where the frustration comes from, because it feels like this is very self-inflicted. It's very, I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm going to solve all these problems, and then, oh, it didn't work the way I thought, like, because for XYZ, and maybe that's his fault, maybe that's not, but it doesn't matter, because when you're the face of the franchise like this, and thinking about the Rangers and all the assets they could have just for being the Rangers, right, and the benefits of that, it's frustrating also too, just to feel like it's a bit of an insult to the entire fan base to think like they're not going to be angry about this. And it goes back to that statement of like, not even kind of saying anything in response to that. So it's just, it really feels like it's a self-made problem that doesn't seem to have any sort of plan right now. And I think that's the issue. We could try to be optimistic. We could be negative. I try to be somewhere in between, I guess. But I understand why people are reacting, because it doesn't seem like there's any plan right now. And we're not going to have really any answers here for a few more weeks, so especially with the roster freezes. So we're going to have to just speculate until then.
Yep, and I guess, on paper, it looks worse on paper, like without context, but on paper you look at something like, you're like, okay, Chris Drury moved on from Kreider, Panarin, and then of course Trouba and Goudreau, and really what he got for all four of those guys, it's a couple of third-round picks, it's Urho Vakanainen and Liam Greentree. And obviously the biggest question mark is Greentree. We'll see like what that ends up being. But I just feel like these returns we've gotten in the last 10 years have been horrible. Like, when's the last time we got this big splash? We got like a Cop, we got a Vetrano, guys that are good, but not these like impact trades. I mean, you could Mikula, like good players, solid NHL players. But like when we're dumping these contracts and we're getting rid of these big players now, like this Panarin deal, I didn't expect anything good, but you look at the Brock Nelson return, look at the Marchand return. No. I mean, it just hurts. It just sucks, man, to be a fan of this team right now. It just to be honest. I mean, nothing new. We all know that, but it's just like, wow, like it's really one punch in the gut after the other.
Yeah, it's just like I said. It's not. There's not a lot of optimism to have. It just seems like a directionless kind of pit right now. And I think I'm a big Premier League soccer fan and follow all that. And like honestly, we're lucky there's not relegation here with the way they're trending and stuff. We can kind of just, I guess, turn it off. And I'll kind of be watching spotty here and there. I'll probably watch a bit and see kind of what happens. But really until we see a plan, it's going to be a frustrating and continuing boring and bad product there. At least I guess all I could say is at least the Knicks are having some success, right? So
right, like I mean, I can you truly remember in your life? I mean, there's the Dark Ages, but has the morale ever been this low? And the Dark Ages were bad, of course they were, but like, did we have the same expectations that we did with this team the last 2 years? I mean, at the very least this year, you knew last year could be a wash, but the fact that they are so bad, like I can't remember them ever being blown out like this, and they're losing close games too, but like these last 2 years, it's just like astonishing. And like you said, you're just numb to these losses.
That's how I feel right now.
Yeah,
I'm not even reacting. It's so sad. Like I hate not reacting. Like I don't like that. That's like it's like 2010 like Mets vibes. You know what I mean? Like I don't need that. It's like so. It's just it's frustrating. You're not really sure. And back to your question, I mean, that was the era when I was falling in love with hockey. So I feel like my dad would maybe have a better answer because I would watch anything. But like look, at least then maybe you had a few more stars and stuff like that. Maybe you could say, hey, at least they have the money to keep spending pre-salary cap. But right now, as far as in a salary cap era, I think this is as low as it is because even when 17-18, when they did that, we were coming off of, 11 and 12 years of playoff runs and all this good stuff. And honestly, I think they were more justified then because they did make all these runs. They went for it with that group. They were so close, with that group. And I think it made more sense to put out that letter. It's like, hey, we just went for it for north of a decade and nearly got there. Whether they did it the right way or not and wrote a goaltender and used that to overcompensate for what they didn't have otherwise is another conversation, but they did. And even like the next year, like 18-19, there wasn't much expectations, but they had a few things kind of going, and then they win the lottery and they kind of get Panarin and it starts trending, right? And you feel optimism. Right now, yeah, there's none. And there's no extra troops coming in the prospect pool that's going to come save you here. There's not really a big free agent that I could see them, unless they somehow make some trade and go after Jason Robertson or something. I think there's a lot of reason to be concerned. Now that could turn around, like I said before, with the Mets offseason and how people felt, but right now, I get it, and it's as doom and gloom as it gets. It truly is the Garden Blues here.
That's what it feels like. It does feel like he's waiting out for like a Jason Robertson type. It's either going to be Robertson or an Alex Tuck, right? Which
yeah.
If you're going to take that money and give it to a 30-year-old Alex Tuck, then again, what are we doing? What are we
Seriously.
doing?
Seen that before.
Have you seen the lineup tonight?
No, is it out?
So the line rushes are there, but it's confirmed that Morrow and Othman are not playing. So Anton Bleed is in, Urho is in. So I think it may have something to do with the Olympic freeze. Maybe there's like a game limit on the amount of something eligibility, and maybe they just want to get Othman playing games. You said you were fully out on kind of Berard and Othman, right? You think there's any redeeming either of these guys?
I mean, Berard at least has some speed and stuff like that. He's just so undersized. Like, I don't know what. Othman, no. I think Othman's really bad. Like, just not good. Just has never impressed me. He's just not. He's going to be playing literally in Sweden in 2 years.
How do you feel about Morrow?
Yeah, Morrow, I think, is like still interesting. I mean, like there's sometimes he can make plays that like he's another guy who's got dumb confidence though. Like he makes some boneheaded decisions. Like he's very confident with the puck, but he makes some plays with it. I mean, I don't hate Morrow by any means, but I could see him like absolutely running some like old heads up the wall because he makes some decisions with the puck that are wild. He's lucky he's skilled enough to get away with it sometimes. But yeah, I don't dislike him on the back end there, but he has to work smarter, not harder sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny. Like even in the small amount of youth hockey that I played, like as silly as that is, like I remember getting screamed at if I threw a backhand pass up the middle. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's just like
at 6 years old.
Just like, come on, man! Like he loves that. Like he loves like I was away and for a little bit, so I didn't even see a lot of the last few weeks. I'm gonna watch tonight for sure. But like it is crazy. Like sometimes his decision making, just the confidence, just like a flat-footed backhand pass. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like, what are you doing? Like, and I get it why he's probably just so frustrated to coaches because you see the skill there, but man, he makes some boneheaded decisions.
What makes you wonder, what are his expectations? Like, is he supposed to be this like offensively gifted guy that's going to develop into more of a two-way? Like, I don't really know what the expectations are for Morrow, aside from like, we're going to stick him on the power play and otherwise he's going to be on the bottom pair and we'll see what happens. But is there really a game plan for Scott Morrow?
He's one of those guys, right, where he's so talented he's going to get chances. I'm not... Tony DeAngelo shouldn't get chances because of other reasons, but like Tony DeAngelo is one of the guys who like was going to keep getting because like on paper you see the talent, right? We did see that in spurts there. So like Scott Morrow, like kind of similar. Like he's produced point wise, like not easy. I mean, he put up 39 points, in the AHL last year at 52 games. Like he was an AHL All-Star. Like was a point per game player in college. I mean, he's produced in the AHL, which is not necessarily a league that's easy to produce in for defensemen. If you look, especially young defensemen, I should say. But look, he's pushing 23 now, so I mean, at some point he's going to have to kind of come into his own. He's been okay this year at times, and been that little Fox-like motion sometimes when he's running a power play and whatnot. But look, I think that's a guy that like you'd really hope could turn into a really stable second pair defenseman who could drive play offensively. Maybe not a perfect defensive player, might need to be with another more defensively responsible guy, but I think there could be some opportunity there for him, to produce in that second kind of pair role. Is he going to be at Fox levels and maybe being close to a point per game in the NHL? No, clearly not. But look, if you could find a guy who could put up 25 to 35 points on the back end, heck, maybe even pushing 40 one year, you take it. But he's got to be better with his decision making to get there, because he is definitely a liability in his D zone. Honestly, now we just got to be rooting for Trocheck to have a great Olympics so they could trade him.
Yeah.
I saw somebody said that. They're like, all right, Trocheck's going to be playing like 24 minutes a night now.
Well, and potentially, he could have a bad Olympics, and this makes
screw himself. And screw himself. I know.
So it's, fun times as a fan of this team. That'll do it this week, or this episode, because we're going to see how often we're able to do this. If breaking news happens, I'm sure we'll jump on here and do as much as we can and react to it. But thank you, everybody, for listening. Once again, I'm Jake Albee. That's Connor McNeilis. Take care. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.